special Saturday episode, Dr. James Beckett Sports Card Insights. I'm going to talk about fear. Thank you to our sponsors, Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, as well as ComC.com. Fear can be a great immobilizer. It's been said that fear can be spelled out as F, false, E, evidence, A, appearing, R, real. False evidence appearing real, F-E-A-R. But that's really about irrational fear, fear that's not real, the nightmare kind of stuff that probably is never going to happen. But some fear is legit, is debilitating, and in many cases needs to be overcome. If you're in business, you're going to be taking risk, and you've got to be able to deal with the fear of failure. Now, I actually had a friend, a very close friend, who I'm convinced was actually more afraid of success than failure. He was more comfortable with taking less responsibility. But for most people, they're not necessarily afraid of success or failure. They have fear of a bad outcome. For example, with the COVID-19 situation, what's the fear there? Again, we're not having any card shows because people are afraid. Why are they afraid? Are they afraid about getting sick? I don't think they're afraid about getting the disease, because if they are out and about, they really could get the disease. But I'm guessing they're going to be more afraid or fearful of dying from the disease or one of their loved ones dying. So, but again, the data seems to show that if you don't have other complications, medical issues, being old or having diabetes or obesity, you're probably going to get sick. It's not going to feel good for a while, but a very, very small percentage of healthy people are going to die. I did a recent episode about gambling. Were you a gambler? And again, there's risk associated with everything. There's a risk of getting out of bed in the morning, and there's a risk of staying in bed, of going to work or not going to work, buying a card or buying a box or buying a collection or not, or passing. There's risk really either way, and you can be afraid either way. I did the episode about gambling that, probably the problem with these inveterate compulsive gamblers that have problems, they're too optimistically discounting the risk and the fear. And when they do, they take on bets that are not, in the long run, not going to work out for them. They may win a few, but in the long run, it works against them. But I want to focus on a couple other fears that I think have to do with sports card insights. The first is this FOMO that you've heard about, the fear of missing out. The problem is in our industry, in the sports card collecting and sports card even investing, that fear of missing out is what drives you to the herd. And I've mentioned that, when you're doing what everybody else is doing, that sounds great. You're not going to miss out, but, that's not always the best way to, if you want to have better returns, you do what everybody else does. And especially if it's afterwards. Case in point, people, looking back in hindsight, people should have jumped into the Topps Project 2020 immediately, one of our sponsors. You would have made a killing, 1,000% within a month. The problem is the proverbial herd, was only 1,000 customers, probably even less because of the bulk orders. So, and they're spread out all across the country, but the boldness and the working and the dealing with that fear of, the fear of missing out, apparently, people were willing to miss out. They're looking at the concept for printing up cards, printing up to demand, and then selling as many as are asked for. And so what comes into play is not just the fear of missing out, the counter fear that also kicks in for our industry is the fear of embarrassment, the fear of looking stupid. And that's very powerful. And so if you follow the herd, you're not going to look stupid because you're going to do what everybody else does. And if they're all stupid, then you're just one of the people. But there was actually a study in soccer that showed that a soccer goalie who was facing a crucial penalty kick, generally they'll dive hard left or hard right based on the sense of the striker approaching the ball, and they'll have a sense that it's going to go left or right. but they've done studies to show that just staying put can be the best, the better strategy. But it just looks bad. It looks like you're being passive, and it can be embarrassing if you're just standing there and somebody popped it in the corner and you were just waiting in the middle for an easy down the center. But if you're diving left and diving right every single time, then the penalty kicker can just say, I'm just going to go right down the middle. So fear of embarrassment has trumped fear of missing out for most of our industry when it came to pulling the trigger on this TOPS Project 2020. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later, but in hindsight, did it look too expensive? It's $20 a card. But the same thing can be said for any new product or box release of an exciting sports card product. That's why breakers do well, because they'll mitigate that risk. They'll spread it out, and you're not having to buy the whole box. You're able to buy the portion hopefully that you're interested in. So the moral of the story, if you're a collector, if you're a hobbyist, I hope you don't struggle with fear. I hope you're enjoying. If you're too fearful, then your bets are too high, or you've got too much riding. Now, if you're in the business, you should be careful. You should be cautious. If you have nothing ventured, there's nothing gained. It's pretty easy sometimes. It depends on what kind of personality you have. You may need to evaluate your fear based on a worst case scenario. But if you're a pessimist, you can already do that. You maybe need to be evaluating your fear based on the best case or a more reasonable case scenario, and then lean into your fear if that seems to be prudent. And then just enjoy. If you're not having more winners than losers, then you're probably not going to stay in the hobby very long. And I hope you do, but do not put your physical death or economic death on the line. Enjoy, lean into your fear, and have a great time on a hobby that the risk is part of the fun. And we've sure been on a winning streak lately where we've had a lot more winners than losers. So thanks, listeners. Be back again tomorrow or on Monday with another episode.